Mr. Sullivan.
Mr. Jackson, I'm feeling very, very festive. This seems like a festive season right now.
Is it looking like a winter wonderland up there?
Yeah, it's just starting. I find the period probably from halfway through November to halfway through December really a high energy period in Toronto.
That's probably true. And then by the end of Christmas,
it gets really hectic after like the middle of December, and then disappointment sets in on Christmas Day.
Uh-oh. And then everybody's sick of winter.
Yeah, and there's looming on the horizon is this, this very, very, very ugly experience here in the North called February.
Yes, exactly. Isn't that funny? This whole, it's so, I was sitting out in my hot tub this morning, and it is thinking about
February.
I was thinking about how much I love Florida from November to May. It's just the best place to be.
Yeah. I actually am a winter lover.
Not me.
I grew up on a farm in northern Ohio. It's not very different from, Toronto. Same sort of terrain, same sort of weather patterns. And I used to wander through the fields during the winter time, and I got a lot of great freedom memories of just chucking along, thinking about my thinking, and I've never had a problem with winter, but I do have a problem with February. I think that there's something fundamentally
just skip right through it.
Unredeemable. There's something unredeemable about February.
Nothing good ever happens in February.
No, it's almost like
unless you come to Florida, that's really that's the only light at the end of that tunnel.
Yeah. So my solution is that you add 14 days to January and 14 to March.
I like what you're hearing. Yes. That reminds me of the...
it'd be like December 45th.
Or just cut it right off. Just cut it right off.
December 45th.
To get to March.
And then the next day is March 1st.
That reminds me of the joke that the Newfoundlanders were really excited about Quebec seceding from Canada because it would be a shorter drive to Ontario.
Yes, indeed. And they haven't given up hope. They haven't. Now, Kathy Davis was just there, and apparently St. John's is a really fun city. Have you been?
Yes. Well, you know that I am actually from Newfoundland.
Yeah, because your father,
Gander,
right?
On the U.S. Air Force Base. So I was there. I lived there for 2 weeks, but I still get full Newfie credibility because I was actually born on the rock there. So I'm full Newfie.
Yeah. A lot of the Americans who are, and others who don't have the inside knowledge that we have. Speaking of inside knowledge. Okay, channel switch here. I was thinking, the whole thing about, people get prosecuted for having inside information or somebody cheated by having inside knowledge. And I began thinking about that in the world, there's actually only two kinds of knowledge. There's inside knowledge and there's worthless knowledge.
Yes, that's interesting.
In other words, to have knowledge means that you have knowledge that's different and better than the knowledge that everybody else has. In other words, if knowledge doesn't have a an advantage to it, then it's kind of worthless knowledge.
That's interesting. It's just been, and that fits with something I've been thinking about this week, because this has been a very reflective weekend for me here. On the 22nd of November, which was Thanksgiving Day, marked the 30th year of the day I got my real estate license and started my entrepreneurial career and got my first listing and my first sale. But the thing that I was looking back on is I start to realize now, so over this 30 years, we talk about the 25-year framework, right?
Yes.
And I started thinking about, okay, what if I could go back to that period of time right now, just as an exercise to go back to there? And I realized how I was kind of looking at the chapters of my 30 years here. And I spent, 7 years building my real estate business before partnering up with Joe Stump. And
yes.
So that 7 years, though, seems like just a blip on that 30-year time frame right now. Like that reads all as one thing,
Mm-hmm.
And
mm-hmm.
I thought about going back now, knowing with the knowledge that I have now, after 30 years of thinking about and solving all of these puzzles, how much faster it would be to get, to go right back to the beginning with all the knowledge. So much of the time is really involved in trying to figure the stuff out, right? And do the experimenting. So this knowledge is knowledge is like the fast track. And it's really gotten me to where I think about this idea of what we're talking about with the collaborations as game changers, to be able to go back, like what I really have the opportunity to do through my go-go agent things, is to give somebody who's starting out now the advantage of this 30 years of knowledge that I've already figured out. I'm being the who for them in figuring out and pointing them in the right direction of...
You're the crucial who. You're the crucial who. And if they're the right persons. So let me ask you a question.
Sure.
If you were looking for mindsets in go-go agents now, where they are, and the criteria would be that they would have the right mindsets to take advantage of the knowledge that you're bringing back to them, what would be the first three mindsets that you'd be looking for in the individuals, whether it was worth your time to actually share the knowledge or not?
Yeah, I think that's, I think that ambition would be the one thing, like you're saying, like a 10 times ambition, like that they are wanting they're ambitious in wanting to grow their business, not that they're just kind of like half in and half out of it kind of thing. That I think makes a big difference. I think the general optimism about the future of real estate. Because I think a lot of people are pessimistic and fearful.
A lot of talk. There's a lot of the general narrative is negative right now.
Yes, exactly. So it's easy to kind of, even with that, to be even to try and put on a good face, but to really deep down feel like a little bit pessimistic about the future, and realizing that if with that future, so ambition and optimism and a what's the word I was thinking of? Well, to be abundance might be a good word. Abundant minded. We're thinking that they're
But there's just also
there's so much opportunity.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And collaborative. I think being knowing, I think that really buying into who, not how.
Yeah. So one of the
big
things
piece of
that
it.
just to connect some thoughts, I had last Tuesday, so between our since our last podcast, I had the best ever sales presentation that I've ever made to to new people who are just coming in to see what coach is about. And we had about 70, and to date, I think we're at around 25, 26 signups out of the 70, which is a really good. And that will probably end up with 6 or 7 more by the end of 30 days. In other words, that we count from the first day to the 30th day as being the results of that sale. In the case where they actually say it was because of that presentation. So there's a good chance that we'll get up very close to about 50% of the room out of this. And
that's including including my friends Chuck and Melissa.
Yes,
we're there.
Yes, yes, indeed. And I'll have to check to see where they were. And the thing about it was the entire presentation from start to finish was on who, not how. Okay. And the new book, which tomorrow I will send by FedEx, the new book, Who, Not How, is out. And I have completely redesigned the entire strategic coach program as an upward curve. You've seen that curve, I call it. You've seen how I'm designing it.
Yes.
But it's who, not how is the curve. So you just get better and better. And you give yourself 25 years, you get better and better at who, not how. And I had 5 panelists, including, do you know Glenn McQuinney?
Of course I do, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he may be in the program because of you.
He is, yes.
I don't know.
Yes, for sure.
And he was there as one of my panelists. So Glenn's been in the program for 5 years. And we had 5 different occupations. Longest person was Paul Bourbonnier, who started with me as a one-on-one coaching client in 1987. So I've seen him every quarter for 31 years. And it just, my team came up and they were ecstatic about it. It's like everybody just got it, and I've always felt very constrained by the sales presentations because I knew too much. I had the curse of knowledge. I knew too much.
Right.
And here I only had to know one thing. So my whole life now, I just have to know one thing. And that is I have to know where who, not how starts, and then just keep adding dimensions to it. But the one thing that I wanted to say, and it had to do with your criteria for the people who could best use your knowledge, and that was 10 times the ambition. And I said, why 10 times the ambition is crucial is because you won't procrastinate enough. You won't procrastinate enough. 10 times ambition means that you'll really procrastinate a lot. And that will naturally move you to who, not how. So they'll see Dean Jackson is my number one who, because he's taking 30 years of tested knowledge in the marketplace and he's making it available to me. So I'm not going, if I'm one of the go-go real estate agents, I am not going to try to create the wheel here. I'm going to take advantage of the wheel that somebody else has already created. And I'm convinced that if you don't have 10 times ambition, you won't procrastinate enough to get on the who, not how track. So
that's fascinating. Because it feels like you can always get around to doubling your business. There's always time to pull that out at the end. You could cram and get that done by the end of the year. That's really interesting.
Just phone 10 strangers before 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody else, like a real estate broker manager will say, now, here's the key. Just call 10 strangers before 8 o'clock in the morning and your career will be set. But it'll get you sales, but it'll be the same kind of sale for the next 30 years.
And I call that the hamster wheel. That's really what that is.
Hamster wheel. Yeah,
it's a hamster wheel. You got to get on and spin that wheel, and as soon as if you're not spinning it, it's not nothing's happening. And that was the big shift for me, was discovering flywheels. Investing time in things that are going to
wheels that propel themselves.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, here's the interesting thing is if I look at the way that you take cities and you map out them by identifiable, sort of self-defined neighborhoods, so like the beaches.
Yes.
You know why I call it the beaches and not the beach?
Why?
Because if you go north, up a little further, like about 5 or 6 blocks north of Queen Street, they call it the upper beaches. And I said, well, how can there be upper beaches which aren't actually beaches?
Right, exactly.
If there's not lower beaches,
I love that about you. I just, you raised up in my, you hold a very lofty position in my regard right now. And that just elevated another 3 levels, because it's exactly that same logic that won't allow me to eat at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, because I can't figure any circumstance that Ruth's Chris makes any sense.
Yes. No,
we have strong principles.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't have logic with the small things, how can you ever have logic with the big things?
Exactly. Oh, that's so funny and true.
Yeah, but think about the way that you analyze a real estate that logically speaking, with a single customer starting very young, their first real estate purchase. A really top-notch agent could literally keep that real estate customer within the same neighborhood for their entire buying life, just by moving according to your map, the map that you did, and do it. That's inside knowledge. That's what I'm talking about, inside knowledge. Okay, you get. Like, for example, someone would say, well, if you're going upscale, you have to start with Forest Hills, or you have to start with Rosedale, or Lawrence and Young. You start there, but that's general knowledge. That's not inside knowledge.
That's true. So that's interesting.
Yeah, and I'm feeling is that all knowledge that makes a difference in the world is actually inside knowledge, as opposed to worthless knowledge. A lot of people go worthless knowledge is kind of like this car will satisfy you if it's always going downhill.
Right. Oh, that's funny.
It's having your car go uphill, which is the real
with the air conditioner on. Yeah,
with the air conditioner on. Yeah. So anyway, it's very, very interesting. But when I look at more and more, what I look at how, let's say, things are explained in the general world. I said, yeah, but if you followed that knowledge, you'd just be doing what everybody else is doing. You wouldn't have any opportunity to differentiate yourself.
Yes, that's true. So that, that kind of information, knowledge, when I think about it now, is that's, I think when people reflect on going back to redo something, that the thing that is really I wonder just how much it collapses, if like how it compresses things if you could go back and have that knowledge at the beginning rather than having to win it. And it's really
yeah. You know, but here's the thing, that there's an aspect of self-forgiveness about the concept that you have, because I often notice, I don't do it anymore because I've really thought it through, but I notice when people talk about, let's say a starting point 30 years ago, and they say, gee, I wish I had done this, I wish I had done that, and everything else. And there's a lack of self-forgiveness. You were actually doing as well as you possibly could have back then. There was no deficiency in either your knowledge or your capability. You were actually, my belief is that all through people's lifetime, they've always been operating at 100% of what they were capable of doing in the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or at 80%.
Well,
consciously taking the 80% approach. Yes.
Yeah, but we have room for discussion on this, because I've come up with a great new thought since I talked to you last time.
Oh, I'm in the right place today.
And it relates directly to what you just said. Okay, So here's my thought. There's never any room for improvement. That's the first. It's two sentences. Okay, so the first one is, there's never any room for improvement. That's sentence number one. Here's sentence number two. I'm just going to give about 10 seconds pause here.
Okay.
You know, just to create a sense.
Vamp a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. Here's the second sentence.
Okay.
But every improvement creates more room.
Oh, okay.
There's never any room for improvement, but every improvement creates new room.
That's awesome. I like that. You know,
so tell me what hit you. Tell me what hit you about that, because everybody I've said it to, it hits them, and they said, "Oh, wow."
Yeah, no, that hit me a lot, because the thing is that when I look at the, as part of GoGo Agent, the thing that we focus on is what these elements that I've laid out as the listing agent lifestyle. And the first 5 are business elements, things that if you're going to live the listing agent lifestyle, you've got to have a way to get listings. You got to have a system for multiplying your listings. You got to have a system for getting referrals, for converting leads, and for finding buyers. Those are the business things, the core things. But then the lifestyle elements that drive it are 3 things I call daily joy, abundant time, and financial peace. And when I look at those things, that it's some combination, never really the knowledge. Certainly it's the knowledge of what to do in the first 5, as far as the business elements go. We've got all the tools and everything for them. But the thing that really, I think, limits people is this sense of scarcity of time, or urgency of time, driven by by something less than financial peace.
Yes.
And that often those things that creates this vicious cycle where they're not having money requires them to then do things that are less than joyful with the limited amount of time that they have. That's kind of this downward end of it. But if you get to the point where if you have financial peace and you're just doing the things that you enjoy, and you're engaged in who, not how, as a fundamental thing, that just, as you're going up on that upward curve just continues to make things better and better and better.
Yeah, but the thing is that the room is created by the improvement. So
yes,
there's a gap and gain concept here, that the thought, I always have room for improvement, is actually a gap concept, okay? Because you're actually putting the emphasis on what didn't happen or is not happening. In other words, I have room for improvement there. That means that
that's
fundamentally
true. Improvement is
failing.
only a measurement. Improvement is only a measurement of
what happened
based on the past. That's exactly right. There's room for improvement, right?
No, and the thing that I get, is that I've become super sensitive. I mean, my ears have gone on high alert of picking up on little phrases that people will just drop throughout the day, and the reason it was actually I was having breakfast about a week ago with David Engel. David, of course.
I do.
And David's 27, I think, 1991. So he's 27 years in the program. And he's done wonders. Started off as a printer in Montreal, moved to Toronto, and then became, a super marketer, of what you can do with, especially with direct mail, which our friend Brian Kurtz will tell us is still the single most powerful form of marketing communication in the digital age, is writing a letter, putting in an envelope, putting in a stamp. And when your postal service is actually working, which ours isn't right now, that mailed letter with a stamp on it actually has about 10 to 12 times greater impact than if you send, digital messages. Yeah. Unless you send a 9-word email.
That's right.
Anyway, but the thing is, I said, well, how's it going? He says, great. He says, always room for improvement. And I said, actually, there isn't. Actually, you have absolutely no room for improvement right now. And he just looked at me. I said, no, there isn't any room for improvement. You don't, I tell you right now, you have absolutely no room for improvement. But if you improve something in the next 90 days, it'll actually create more room.
That's such a great mind shift. That really is.
Well, it eliminates woulda, shoulda, coulda. I think that the three most nefarious words in the English language are, I could have done that, I would have done that, I should have done that. And I said, no possibility that you could have done that. Any of that could have happened. That could have happened. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I just found that, and then I've been, the way I do, I treat one of these ideas like a seed, and I'll plant it here and see if it grows. Plant it. But everyone I've talked to about this concept, they stop and suddenly and they say, "Oh, I just felt something. I just felt better when you said that."
Yeah.
And I said, just put all your attention on improvements, the next improvements you're going to make. Don't worry about the room that you're not fulfilling or the room that you're failing to fill. There is no room.
That's awesome. It's I had this week a similar language thing, because I said something that I haven't said, which was that you can't same your way to different. This is the first time I
saw, it's so funny you should mind, because I read something that resonates with that. And they said, what you really want is fame based on actually achieving things, not fame based on celebrity.
Mm-hmm.
And a celebrity, see if I can line it up with the thought that you just said. But you can't fame your way.
Sorry, I said same. Same is what I said.
Yeah.
Same with an S.
Yeah,
same.
You can't.
Yeah, same. You can't
fame
your way to different.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Yes.
Yeah, and the reason is because you only try to fame your way the way that other people are faming their way.
Yes, that's true. Exactly. I watched a documentary on Netflix the other night about all these people pursuing social media fame that want to be influencers, and it's it's pretty funny to see the things that we do, just being famous for being famous, you know?
Yeah, I think that train left the station quite a long time ago, actually.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, but there's certainly the people chasing it certainly haven't, you know?
Yeah.
Everybody's chasing that train.
I mean, somebody who's really different and uses the internet will probably come up with a different way of using the internet, but they won't do it because they become famous for doing the internet. They'll do it because they find a different way of using the internet. Yeah. It's really, really interesting, the complexity of the internet right now. I mean, the forces, the counteractive forces are really very, very powerful now. Of the cultural heroes that, if you were looking 5 years back, you were looking at the Facebook as a hero medium, you're looking at Google as a hero medium, and now they're up to their neck in controversy and conflict and confusion and everything like that. So what do you make of that? Is that just a natural kind of result of creating a medium where you have no criteria about who gets to use it, and so it kind of
I think that's we're definitely coming where the new generation now of digital natives, they call it now, where kids, the new generation, anybody under 30 years old basically now. I mean,
I think they're called the Z generation after the millennium generation. Yeah.
But that all those kids have no clue about what the world was like prior to social media and everybody being everywhere at all times, and I think that we kind of either get nostalgic about the past and kind of want to kind of throttle kids back from that, or just totally embrace it. And it's almost to the point now where we know that you really can't. It's overwhelming. It's always there. It's a bottomless buffet that you could never get to all of it, and that's where the discernment is really going to come in.
So let me ask you a question, because both of us precede the internet. I mean, we were fully functional with back legs before the we were air breathers, and we could walk on land before the internet came. How is that an advantage for you and me? The fact that we experienced life long before this. I mean, I think you're onto something here. That actually not being born. See, you talk to somebody about the internet who's like 20 right now. Yeah, and it's like talking to a fish about water.
Right. That's exactly what's water.
What difference has water made to you? And this water. What's water? I don't.
Right.
Water? I don't know. What are you talking about? Water. What's water?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you talk to your average fish, at 20 feet underneath the surface, and say,
Yeah.
Are you doing well with the water you have? And he says, water? What's water? I haven't the slightest idea what you're talking about, water. Besides, I haven't seen a fish like you before. Well, what kind of fish are you?
Yeah, right.
And so what's the difference between us and, let's say, a 20-year-old right now who is born in the internet age?
Well, that's an interesting time frame too, because that's very similar to what when I started. So in 1988, or 1988, sorry, I was 22 years old.
Yes.
So that very similar now. So I had grown up my entire childhood and college, everything. I had never had any interaction with the internet, and I remember like looking back just how many things now are so so much better, it's ridiculous, so much bigger opportunities. Especially I think who not how is the key that unlocks all of it now going forward. Like looking back then, you had just access to you didn't have access to this bottomless pool of who's. You only really had, like, I think about it now that I realize how irrelevant almost geography is in my world. Like when you think about where all of your social contacts, all of your business prospects, all of my clients and everything like that, there was a lot more local centric, like growing up in Halton Hills, that that whole thing, when you really think about that, was like Canada to me, having that Canadian experience of being a Canadian. When I look at it now with a bigger global perspective, is really like I grew up in a suburb of a pretty major city, is really the reality of what that was, because that's really what the Canadian, if you take the whatever Ontario is in the percentage of the total population of Canada, that's the whole.
Well, it's easily a third Ontario population.
Yeah. As far as all eyes on Ontario in terms of the rest of Canada, that's really the way it felt. It was the epicenter. Toronto is the epicenter of Canada growing up. So everything was kind of that regional stuff had a bigger impact. We just didn't have access to talent or resources or tools or no real technologies, around the being able to make things easier.
Faster, easier, cheaper, bigger.
Yes, everything, right? Like now, you can be, immediately wherever you are, you can tap into a global marketplace of a really unique segment of the market and be found, like there's, speaking of Newfoundland, there's a place up there that's really become world renowned over the last 5-7 years, called the Fogo Island Inn. And
actually, Kathy Davis and her husband were just there 2 weeks ago.
Okay, perfect. So what was their report? Like, this is
they loved it. They loved the whole area. Even the mainland, the mainland leading out has become quite popular. There are new inns and restaurants and that going.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So that but that whole thing where now you've got, in 1988, it would have been very difficult to make a place like that viable.
Yeah.
And now with the access to the people who all over the world want, like, making that focus a world renowned restaurant and inn, it's pretty amazing. I think that we've, by default, global thinking is no obstacle, so I think that's really one of the biggest changes that we have.
One of the things, I've driven, north of, on some routes, sometimes Babs and I will be going to the cottage, which is, door to door, figure 3 hours, and we're sort of heading in a northeasterly direction, up to Halliburton, which is the nearest larger town, real larger town to our cottage. And and we would go through 3 or 4 really small communities on the way, taking an alternative route. And I would sit there and I said, and you could see there was a general store, there were a couple churches, there looks like sort of a community hall in these places, but a lot of them are closed down, gas stations abandoned and everything else. And I said, I bet 50 years ago, all these towns were a lot more interesting than they are now. I bet probably radio was the start of the breakdown, where kids at nighttime on their crystal sets would hear about places outside of their town. And for the first time, you would grow up with a double consciousness. You were aware of what was going on in the community, but you were also aware that there were other places. And then telephone obviously made that, started extending that outward, and the movies started extending that outward. And I think that's where small places were no longer interesting to the kids growing up in them, that there was something outside. I remember at nighttime in northern Ohio, because you get the faraway radio stations at night when the sun is not interfering with radio waves. So I remember getting Chicago, St. Louis. One night I got New Orleans, which is a heck of a long way south. Then Pittsburgh, KDKA in Pittsburgh. And, and in New York City, I could pick up some of the New York City. And I would just sit there, and I was sitting, here I am in my bed, and I'm connecting mentally, and enjoyably with places that are 500, 1,000 miles away. And then I started looking them up. I started looking them up in the encyclopedia and everything else. So, but meanwhile, I was living in a small farm community, which had around 1,500 people 50 years ago, and it's got 1,500 people today.
Wow.
And and nothing's gotten more interesting in this small community over the last 50 years. Yeah, and it's a very, very, what you say is very, very interesting, this connecting mentally and emotionally with places which are way, they're not local, they're global.
Yeah. And that's the thing. That's what I think about, is that just the relationship centric stuff. Like my closest tier of relationships outside of my inner circle locally here are largely spread out all over, but we don't feel at all detached from it. Like I look at that as a uniquely this time affording that. Yeah. And so that
now here's a
everything.
question I have you regard that, but I don't think I don't think anybody actually has global experiences. Okay, so I'm putting this out as a challenging thought. That basically, I think that each individual is only able to interact intellectually and emotionally with a discrete number of people. Okay.
Right.
And that's kind of your locality. In other words, a part of my locality is the Joy of Procrastination podcast.
Yes.
Okay. And it's with you. It's not with anybody else. It's with you. And you're part of my locality.
Yes.
Okay. It just happens to be that it's, whatever the distance is between Toronto and Orlando.
There's no distance between us and Cloudlandia, because that's where we're.
No, in
Cloudlandia.
Yeah. And, but you're sitting in an analog situation and I'm sitting in an analog situation. So we're splitting the difference, actually. And it's very, very interesting. And I say, where people get confused around this global issue is that they think that we actually operate globally, but we use Cloudlandia to bring our analog situations immediately together. That's really what we use Cloudlandia for.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, the whole, because that's one of the things I've been thinking about, opportunity-wise here is these, it used to be the challenge was solving the last mile problem, where they called it, right? Getting things like right to your house. And now that's been solved. We've solved the last mile. We can get things, anything that's available can be at your doorstep at the latest tomorrow morning, usually. And that's often in big cities, you could have it the same day. But I think we're really getting down to the last, it's the inside 50 feet that from the doorstep to organizing inside the house. I just see where things like this are going, where the idea, what I've specifically been thinking about are things like Plated and Blue Apron and these food delivery services where they'll deliver the pre-portioned ingredients and things to you so that people can cook home-cooked meals. And but I think following this sense of the convenience as the thing, I think that's really going to open up more opportunities for a local brigade of people who will actually come and cook your Blue Apron meals in your kitchen for you and have them on the plate for you when at an appointed time. So when you get home from dinner, if you get home from work, the meal's already cooked and ready and it's in your home there. That I think that's I think that these things are a lot of these are enablers, and I think there's probably going to be a really great, tying into this kind of gig economy. There's lots of people who have skills that go unused, like being able to cook or assemble and follow directions, that you could see that becoming something like like an Uber or like a thing where that becomes a position that somebody has to go and prepare the meal, or regional, little hubs of it.
Well, it's really interesting because people who are private cooks. In other words, they'll come to your house and actually do the work you are. One of their big problems was sourcing all the materials, but that's handled now.
Right. Yeah, that's what I mean. If everything, it's like an enabling of them.
It's not only been sourced, but it's been prepared for a cook.
It's like a sous chef, right?
Yeah, and so everything is prepared. And the interesting thing about this is that the single most unlimited resource in the world is human aspiration.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, the ability of the planet from a capability standpoint is always in a state of enormous deficiency in comparison to the aspirations that people have.
Mm-hmm.
And you could use a simple example of the people who want to transport themselves to Mars and live in a Mars community and are even willing to die there. In other words, they say, "I don't care if I ever come back." Okay, well, that's a human aspiration, but the capability to even begin that project is very, very deficient, and so you don't have the ability of the capability to match the aspiration. But I would say that that's actually the differential. Okay, if you think about differential in electricity terms, the tension between the positive and negative charge. The positive charge is the aspiration. The negative charge is the current capability, and it creates a spark. And then somebody says, "Yeah, but I can take the capability further than it is now. I mean, we can." We can start offering space flights around the planet Earth, and there's a whole bunch of people saying they're going to do this imminently, but the imminently has been going on for about 10 years now.
Yes, exactly.
And nobody's pulled it off because you don't want to be the first person to offer passenger flights into the the 100, I guess it's 60 miles up is when they say you've actually entered space, and then have the first passenger load explode, and they're
that wouldn't be good for anybody, right?
No, so nobody really wants to be the first one to have their flight fail, and I think that's what's holding it back right now. But interesting, the aspirational quality of this. And yeah,
and that's it's a really it's almost like that people are going to I think the big divider is going to be mainland or Cloudlandia focused centric, and it feels like the big there's still so much of the stuff that has to be done on the mainland.
Yes.
That organize. This is really what Cloudlandia is really allowing people to do. It's very similar to what Peter Diamandis calls those interface moments, right? Looking for, and to package up mainland capabilities into a push button Cloudlandia enabled option for somebody. That, rather than having, we've just had Grubhub open service in Winter Haven in the last little while. And so that, creates all kinds of other opportunities, just the ease of that somebody can, bring anything to you. But still, it really is this whole, I love this idea though of being, of creating these interfaces,
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of
I mean, I just had a wow moment in that, we've been doing Facebook Live now for about the last year and a half. I saw at Genius Network, Bill Phillips, who you know through Joe, Bill Phillips.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he does a morning exercise routine by Facebook Live, and you can sign up for it. And he's got...
I remember last year at the annual event, he did a big
Yeah, and I turned to Paul Hamilton, who's my is in charge of marketing as strategic coach, and I said, I want to do that. I want to start doing, and we'll call it Backstage at Strategic Coach, and you can tune in and we'll talk. And so far, I've had 8 of them, and a team member inside coach, so a backstage team member, will interview me on something that's going on in strategic coach. And we did it. And then between number 7 and 8, we hired a new Facebook expert, a woman who had been out there, and she'd been doing Facebook, taking advantage of Facebook advertising and everything else. And so we've been average about 8,000 downloads per the last 2 or 3. We had gotten up into 7,500 downloads where people downloaded got a lot of action, got a lot of comments back, and everything like that. And she just made one tweak in Cloudlandia, and it cost us $200. And I got interviewed, and so far, 2 weeks out, we're at 36,000. So we've gone up 5 times in the downloads. And
that's awesome.
It was just because she had this little inside knowledge on how you could boost it. It's called the boosting. And she's very simple. She said, you just pay them $200 and they boost your message, and everything like that. And I was remarking, I said, where in the mainland can you pay $200 and get a 5 times return instantaneously? It's not only Las Vegas. If you put in the coin at the right time and the cash in the
that's exactly right.
Slot machine, but it's actually this. But I'm really interested in her because she's really quiet, she's really shy, and she just lives in this world, but she has inside knowledge, and so I'm really going to squeeze the lemon out of her, to find out all the other tricks that she has in Cloudlandia, because this is great.
We know who's been doing that really well is Scott Adams. Scott Adams has a daily live show, Coffee with Scott Adams, and he gets he comes on usually 7 a.m. Pacific and gathers everybody on Facebook and Periscope and whatever else, and then calibrates everybody with the simultaneous sip is the ceremony of starting the thing. So everybody has their cup of coffee and they all take their simultaneous sip, and then he's on to talking about whatever he wants to talk about that day. And it's really interesting political insights and just topical stuff.
Yeah, the big thing he has done to differentiate himself was that he got on the whole Trump thing early.
Right.
And he says, I'm basically a lifetime Democrat. He said, if you really want to know how I vote, I'm a lifetime Democrat. But he said, I'm just taking a look at who seems to have the most persuasive skills out there. And, this guy's got 10 times more persuasive skills. His talent stack, what he calls it, he's just got more. So he's going to win the next election. And he says, not because he's a Democrat or Republican, he's just more persuasive than anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he just stuck with it. I mean, he just totally stuck with it. And then he wrote the book, Winning Hugely, where he explained his whole thinking about it and everything. But, and it's really interesting because, picking fights is the best way to persuade. And I've noticed that this week Trump and the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court are going back and forth. And you'll find about 2 weeks the Supreme Court justice doesn't like being in a fight with the President of the United States.
Right.
That whole thing, don't mud wrestle with pigs. One is you get really dirty, and
the pig enjoys it.
The pig really loves it. The pig really loves it.
That's really funny.
Yeah. that. I said, you do not want to mud wrestle with this particular president of the United States. One is you're going to get really, really dirtied up, and the second thing is he just loves it.
Well, Dan, we've said it all today. I mean, we've got two really great new insights. There's never any room for improvement, but every improvement creates new room.
Yes.
That's profound. And never mud wrestle with a pig.
Yeah.
I mean, we bookended it right there. It's like, that's all we really need.
Anyway, this week we will send you your several copies of the Who Not How book, and you're mentioned prominently right up front. I mention you.
Is this your book? This is the one with
this is my quarterly book. This is my.
This is the precursor. Yeah.
Yeah. So Ben will use this now as the framework for the big book. So we've done the complete thinking on it mindset. Now he's. Ben, we're talking about Ben Hardy here, great block writer. And Ben, has a great agent, has a great publisher. They have great promotion. So he really, really wants to take this book, but he's a psychology major in university. He's just about to get his PhD. And he just knows all the other people who have thoughts about this. And then he's going to interview game changer entrepreneurs and how they're using the Who Not How principle in their work. So everybody who's in my game changer program will be featured in the book.
That's great. Well, I'll have to get on his list.
Yes, well,
he's right down the street here.
No, you'll be first. You'll be first on the list.
Awesome.
So. Yeah. Anyway, so great, and it'll be 2 weeks. I think I'm in Chicago next week, so I won't be talking about it 2 weeks. But pure pleasure.
Yes, always.
Each of us sitting in a comfortable analog situation, but using Cloudlandia to shorten the distance between two analogs.
That's exactly right. I love it. Have a great week, Dan.
Okay. Bye.